Penn State plays Indiana this Saturday at Beaver Stadium, so we're bringing in an expert to tell us more about the Indiana Hoosiers, the team that upset Penn State last year and are trying to do the same this weekend during the Penn State Stripeout. And to do that, to get more information on the team, we've brought in Dustin Dopirak. He covers Indiana athletics for the Indy Star and the Bloomington Herald Times. Dustin, thanks so much for taking time for me today. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
And you were saying before, you're a Penn State alum, so you're very familiar with the team, with the area, and this is going to be a bit of a homecoming for you, right?
Yeah, it is. It's been a bit since I've been back. Probably, I know, at least a couple years for a basketball game. I probably haven't been in Beaver Stadium since 2013, 2012, somewhere in that regard. But yeah, 2004 Penn State graduate, covered the 2002 Penn State football team at the Daily Collegian, so the Larry Johnson 2,000-yard season. Got to cover that with Chris Corman and Jeff France. Was time of my life on that beat, a heck of a year. Loved Penn State, loved all my time there. Didn't see a lot of good football, but that year there was at least a little bit.
Well, just to let you know, I don't think, at least for Beaver Stadium's part, it hasn't changed whatsoever. Now, downtown will look like... Yeah.
Yeah.
Downtown looks completely different now. But, Beaver Stadium will look the same until it falls into the ground. So that's always nice.
No, absolutely. It's the old erector set. Yeah, exactly. That was Jeff Rice's word for it, which I always thought was funny. It's just, it's all of that exposed steel and everything like that. It's going to be Beaver Stadium, and it'll have a ton of people in there, and it'll, it's still one of the funnest places in college football to watch a game.
Yeah, and the press box still sways. It still is feels unstable when you're up there. Or, that's how it's designed.
Yeah, that's what they tell you, right? Just feel safe up there. Just don't worry about it. No big deal.
So let's get into the team a little bit. Obviously, starting with the quarterback and the guy that was the engine for what Indiana did last year in their pretty impressive season, where they were able to finish second in the Big Ten East and upset a lot of teams along the way. He tore his ACL at the end of last season. Can you take us through his rehab and his journey through that and into this year and how he's been playing so far?
Yeah, no, I think he was finished with rehab by about July. So by all accounts, that went well. I mean, he was sort of always on schedule, if you will. And we would get updates, but obviously he wasn't a part of spring practice. But whenever we were able to ask about it, basically he always told us it was going well, and that he was going to be, he was going to be good by the opener. Never said, okay, I'm good now necessarily. It wasn't like when we talked to him at Big Ten Media Day, he wasn't willing to say, well, I'm 100%. He was willing to say, I'm 100% by the opener. That was sort of always his goal. And generally, it seems like physically he is. I don't feel like for the issues that he's had so far, and he's had several, not much of it seemed to be physical to me. It doesn't seem like he's gimpy, but it did seem like for a while, it took him a while just to get used to playing football again. And you got to remember, it wasn't just, he had this ACL tear, but this was his third season-ending injury in 3 seasons. And in all of those years, it was one hit and you're done. It wasn't nagging stuff that maybe he'll come back, maybe he won't come back. It was, a hit and, or a hit or a miss, a non-contact thing or whatever, ends your season. It's over. Basically one play and you're done. So it seemed to take him a minute to get that, just get right mentally with that fact. And it's not necessarily something that he thought consciously that was really going through his mind, but it was just, you got to think of all of that. And they protected him and they protect every quarterback in fall camp. But, they were particularly, the way he phrased it was, Coach Allen's got a quick whistle. So if anyone's anywhere near him, they were, they were blowing the whistle. That was it. No one was going to come close. They weren't chancing an accident. So what that really means is at the end of the day, like, he wasn't around a lot of bodies that could possibly, you're not going to get hit, but he wasn't even played around with to a point where he had to feel nervous. So all of a sudden Iowa happens, and, he's just for the first time since the Maryland injury, being around guys who might hit him again. And it's like, okay, like that took him a moment, and you could just sort of see that, he wasn't totally confident. They also had an injury on the offensive line that week. Their left tackle, Luke Haggard. I don't even know what he had, but he had an injury, and he was there. He traveled, but he they said it was only there for emergency purposes. Basically, he was highly unlikely to play even when he went there. So that shook up their line. Basically, they had guys. Matt Bedford was supposed to move to right guard, and now he's at right guard. But he was back at tackle, and Caleb Jones was at left tackle after being at right tackle all camp. So everything was shook up, and I think it played on him. And you throw in the fact that they're down 14-0 right out of the gate. The first pick that he threw in that game was off of DJ Matthews' shoulder pads. It wasn't a good pass, but it wasn't at somebody to get picked off. It popped up in the air. What's his name? Riley Marsh is right there, takes it back. All of a sudden, they're down 14-0. It's a minute and a half, and it's like, wow. What's this? And he was just never right all that day. I don't think, the Idaho game, he really didn't even. The issue, I think, with it was that the way they scored their points in the Idaho game, they had a blocked punt, they had a punt return for a touchdown. By the time, he got, I think, 2 drives, but he never really got a chance to get a rhythm because they really blown Idaho out in other ways before the offense really got to have one of those days where they remind themselves what it's like to go score 50 or 60. A lot of those just weren't his. So you get to Cincinnati, and then he's taking chances when they start falling behind, and he's throwing bad picks and whatever. So you finally saw him this week look like himself. He threw for 373 yards against Western Kentucky. It's the first time. Western Kentucky's not a good defense. They allowed a lot of holes in there. They really sat back and gave them the opportunity to pick them apart, just with intermediate routes. They did sort of stop some touchdowns. They were pretty good in the red zone, but at least allowed him to a rhythm to feel like, hey, I can throw 15-yard outs again. I'm going to complete these passes. So he comes into this week, I think, a lot more confident than he was before. I think people were really asking a lot of questions, especially Indiana fan base was wondering, should this guy even be the quarterback? Should they make a move to Jack Tuttle, who's a 4-star recruit? Wasn't great last year when he had an opportunity to play when Penix was hurt in the first place, but was able to game manage well enough. And it's like, well, you'll take game management rather than 6 picks in 3 weeks.
Right.
But
right.
I think now you're seeing a guy that's much closer to the guy that you saw last season.
So that is kind of an interesting journey, and you can see some of that on the tape as well. Of there was a very different plan of attack, and obviously when you go up against different defenses with different schemes, you're gonna have a very different plan versus Iowa than you would against Cincinnati. But it did kind of seem like in the Cincinnati game, he was, even if he was pressing, was there more of Michael Penix that we were used to before in that game versus the first 2 weeks, and kind of projecting forward? Everyone expects a quarterback that's throwing interceptions or not playing well to continue to do so until they don't. Yes. So do you think that he has, with a month of the season under his belt, do you think that that's the guy that's coming in to Beaver Stadium, the guy that's going to maybe those off-platform throws that he's thrown anyway in his career, do you think he's going to be more that guy, or do you think he's settled in at this point?
I think he's a little settled in. That doesn't mean there won't be an interception. But I think one thing, Tom Allen said basically, because he went from Saturday, it's after the Cincinnati game saying, every position is up for competition. No one's set in stone. Just because Michael Penix is the quarterback on the depth chart this week, that doesn't mean he's always the quarterback. And then he came in Monday and said, Michael Penix is our quarterback. I have 100% faith in him. And so, we got him talking about, okay, what changed? And he said, I looked at the interceptions and I saw different kinds of interceptions on, week 3 than I saw in week 1. And the biggest thing that he said was, I kept seeing a guy that was trying to make a play. And so I think what that really meant was he's saying, I saw something correctable. I saw something that's like, Mike, you don't have to force it into covers like that. His last 2 picks against Iowa, or against Cincinnati, one, he's basically being dragged down. And all of a sudden, basically, he sees it. One of them falls down, and he's like, I can make a play. And he throws it, and he tries to get it over top of somebody, but it doesn't have his legs in it. So it gets, it's low enough to get picked off. So he sees that and thinks, all right, and that's just a guy taking a risk he doesn't need to take, but that's not something we can't get out of him.
Not a fundamental problem, in other words,
exactly.
Right?
It's not something that's broken. It's a guy, and Penix said when he interviewed him, he's like, it was a guy trying to make a play. The other time it was, late in the game, fourth quarter, basically they're on 3rd down, and he's just trying to keep a drive alive, and it's, they're down by 6. He just needs something to keep it going, and he rolls to his left, and he's getting flushed, and then he sees a guy flash open, but he's between 2 defenders, and he tries to throw it in the window, and he gets picked off. All you got to say there is, Mike, just know when the journey's over. That's kind of the sentence that they use. Know when the journey is over. Know when there's nothing that you're going to be able to do there, and it's better to just take the sack, end the drive, punt it away. whatever, you get out and you live another day and you don't give up any points. And that resonated with him. And I think you saw that against Western Kentucky. You didn't see him force any.
I think Penn State fans are very familiar with that particular type and style of quarterback play after last season.
Yeah.
A reverse image of what Sean Clifford has been this year, of a guy that's been taking care of the football, been uber consistent, and has been making those judicious plays down the field. So that is what Michael Penix was, as an accurate quarterback that could thread the needle into some pretty crazy situations. Now, part of the story with him has been so far this season has been the offensive line. You mentioned the fact that the offensive line had some problems to start the year. Now, are they more back on track? Is that another area that you think this team is back on track? Or are there still some issues remaining from the shuffling they've had to do because of injury?
Yeah, I mean, the issue, they're not a dominant offensive line to start with. So that's the thing that I would say. Even if they're healthy, even if they're fully functional, you're not talking about one of the best units in the league. I think they're okay. I don't think they're a huge trouble spot, but they're not. There's not an all Big Ten player. That's one of the few areas where they don't have an all conference level guy. Basically at this point, I think Matt Bedford is one of those is on the big Outland Trophy watch list, but just about everybody's on the watch list. So they're just okay. They're fine. They didn't run the ball very well last year at all. I think it is a much better line now that it is complete, now that it is what they wanted it to be. But that doesn't mean it's dominant. That doesn't mean that they're going to come in and, push Penn State around up front. I don't expect that to be the case. But all the same, they're at least going to be good enough at protecting Penix that, it is not a, it's not a sieve of an offensive line at this point. It's a much better situation than it was in week one.
Can they operate what they want to do? It seems like later in the season so far, they've been able to protect a little longer to push the ball down the field a little more. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, it has. And again, also part of it was Western Kentucky didn't really they either brought it or they didn't. Basically, I think that was so that they either brought blitzes or they had like 2 and 3 man rushes that they were and so there were cases when Penix could just sit there all day and wait for somebody to get open. Now they were running around like 8 guys who were dropping back in coverage, and that's its own issue. So that I think so in that case they were able to do it, and they've been able to do reasonably well. Penix hasn't been sacked that much. He has been a couple times. I guess part of it is I'll be interested to see what they do against a great D line. They had their moments against Cincinnati. He didn't get completely crunched. Like I said, they're okay. They're running the ball a little bit better too. I think Stephen Carr has picked up some big chunks. They haven't he hasn't been a home run threat yet, but he's been able to pick him up at 15, 20-yard chunks, stuff like that. And been given just enough room to do it.
How would you describe Stephen Carr as a runner? How would you describe his style?
He's got a little bit of shiftiness to him. He's got some speed. He's tough. He's gritty. He's not like the strongest, most powerful guy, but enough. He can break tackles. He can get through somebody. And he's determined, I think, just as a player. I think, obviously he's a USC transfer, 5th-year guy. He was really one of the best recruits in the country when USC got him everywhere, and never thought about going someplace else because he's a California kid, and always wanted to stay home, always wanted to play there. Worshipped Reggie Bush when he was a kid, and between injuries and some other things, and them just having a bunch of backs, he was never really the guy, basically at USC, and he finally gets that opportunity, and I think he knows that this is an NFL shot. This is a chance to make basically have an audition for the league, and this is your best shot, and he is aware of that, and he is come in, I think, just really focused. Again, the one thing you still haven't seen yet is the home run, if you will, the play when he gets past the line and just outruns everybody. He's got good speed. I don't think he's got overwhelming speed, but it's good enough. But you want to see that moment from him if you're Indiana, just one play where he gets past everybody and no one can catch him, and you haven't seen that yet.
So he leads a skill position conversation at the very least, as far as the guys around Michael Penix to help that offense go. And obviously Penn State fans are familiar with Ty Freifogel and Peyton Hendershot. How has Hendershot changed or gotten better since last season, or how do you view him this year as opposed to last?
Well, I mean, one big thing about it was this year he didn't get arrested. So that's
That's a good
that's
start.
it is important. I mean, he was arrested, he was suspended, and then you tack COVID onto that. I mean, I think he was saying, but because of the suspension and because of COVID and because of all that, there was a long time, and he also had injuries. So, all of that sort of piled on that he never got to rehab normally, and all that. All that makes for a bad year. It was a domestic issue, so it's not one of those things where you can sit there and feel all that bad for him. I mean, I don't. There are specifics. I wasn't around to cover it, but he deserved to get in trouble. Basically, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, I don't know. The bottom line is it's a rough deal, and he's apologized for it. He's come out and taken responsibility and said this was wrong. Always an awkward thing to talk about, obviously, but he got in trouble for something that if you did it, you deserve to get in trouble for it.
So outside of Hendershot, there's been a couple of issues in the passing game as far as some injuries have affected Indiana so far as well, right? One last week, I think.
Yeah. No, big one last week. DJ Matthews, a Florida State transfer who himself was, I think it was like 52nd recruit in the country. I think in the 2017 class was basically was ready to hit it like Devontae Smith, CeeDee Lamb, and those guys. 5'11", slot guy. Sort of dangerous punt returner, dangerous guy who could sort of was really the best on the. Guy they had is sort of being able to get behind the defense. I mean, just had a 5-catch, 120-yard performance against Cincinnati. Had a couple key catches in the first drive against Western Kentucky, but then he was fielding a punt. Western Kentucky dude, I can't remember his name, but boomed one. Put a lot more into it, I think, than Matthews was expecting. Had to run it down. It popped off his shoulder pads. Then he just, fell on it. And when he fell, I guess he tore his ACL. So, I mean, it was a non-contact deal. But that was the end of it. I mean, you knew coming off that, he was done, basically, the way that they carried him off. You could kind of tell that one was serious. So that's a big one. I mean, and he was really, I think, just getting used to Michael Penix. Michael Penix was just really getting used to him. You could see that they'd built a lot of faith together between each other. So that's rough, and there's not necessarily a guy other guy who fits that mold. And they've still got Ty Freifogel. I think it was last year's Big Ten wide receiver of the year. I think second team. I can't remember if he was coaches or media. First team on the other, and he was an All-American as well. And he's still solid. I mean, and he had a bad week against Cincinnati. Had I think 3 drops in that game, but turned around 10 catches, 98. 10 catches, 98 yards against Western Kentucky, looked kind of like himself again, too. That's a big thing that helped, I think, Michael Penix feel like himself, was that he was able to get open. He was able to make some plays. So he still has his most reliable wide receiver. But then at this point, they've got to look for somebody else. And Matthews was even a guy that was really good in the punt return game. He had taken one all the way back against Idaho. When he was at Florida State, he took one back against Miami a couple years back. So dynamic guy. And they've got to find, somebody else, basically to make some plays. They have some options. There are 2 outside receivers, Miles Marshall and Cameron Buckley, are 2 guys that have a lot of experience. Buckley was a Texas A&M transfer. He played pretty well for them. Marshall's a big 6'4" guy, and I think he caught like 30 passes last year. He had a pretty good night on Saturday. I think I want to say 6 for 54, somewhere in that range. So I think he's that kind of the next best wide receiver. Got a couple dudes, Jacoby Hewitt and Javon Swinton, who actually had some big catches in last year's Penn State game that have become, I think, more trustworthy over time. Hewitt got some plays on Saturday. So that there are some options. There are some guys that they can look at. But after Freifogel, there's not anybody that is as dynamic, as proven. So that's a big thing that I'm going to be watching for certainly this week, to see if somebody steps up in the receiving game to become, basically a more trustworthy receiver for Penix, and if anybody at all really becomes the deep threat. I mean, Freifogel is really good in the intermediates. He's capable of winning some jump balls, of beating people that way. Basically, if you go up over top and he can take it over a really good cornerback. But he's not necessarily scorching guys on a seam route that nobody can touch him. He's generally, if you're going deep to Freifogel, he's probably got to win a combat catch. He'll win a lot of those, but they haven't done a great job at that so far. That's something they were very good at last year. They were even pretty good at camp. But you haven't seen, one of those basically where you're throwing at the Freifogel and he's covered and he goes over top of somebody 40 yards downfield. That's not a thing that you've seen quite yet. And they've tried a couple and they haven't timed it up. He's either dropped one or it's been over his head or it just hasn't connected. So all of that is stuff that they've been waiting to put together, and they're going to need somebody other than DJ Matthews to do it because, again, he's the one guy that you've seen run by somebody so far this year.
Tom Allen's defenses, teams in general, are always well coached. I think you've mentioned the offensive line is a good unit, but they're not really anything that'll blow you away. They're always, from offense and defense, always seem very well coached, very crisp team, but the defense especially is that time in and time out. Is that the case this year? Because I know there's been some hiccups on both sides of the football this year. Have you seen the same consistency from them? And if so, or if not, what has been the issue on that side of the ball?
They've been pretty good. I mean, they haven't overwhelmed everybody, and you haven't seen the turnovers. I mean, that was really the big thing that got them going last season. They got a lot of short fields. They got a lot of points off turnovers. They led the Big Ten in interceptions. They led the Big Ten in total turnovers. I think they were top 15 in the country in that category, and very good at creating havoc. Also had a lot of sacks last year. A lot of them coming on blitzes. Didn't get a lot of them from the defensive line, but linebackers, defensive backs, they were able to get a lot of that done. They haven't been as good at that this year, but they have had some big moments defensively. Again, big moments against Idaho, had some key plays, especially early. I mean, Cincinnati was really struggling to move the football before Michael McFadden got taken out on the targeting call. Which is a big point of discussion. It was actually a big point of discussion, even watching the Penn State game on Saturday when you saw the targeting call on the Auburn guy that was a little shaky. That was a big moment. I think Cincinnati had maybe had 2 first downs up until that point. They didn't have a first down in the first quarter. I mean, Cincinnati was barely moving the ball, and McFadden goes down, and all of a sudden that opened up a lot really for Desmond Ridder. So McFadden has been the core of it too. That's you could see the value that he had when you took him out. He was clearly for a lot of the game against Western Kentucky, clearly the best player. I mean, they struggled as a group with Western Kentucky's tempo. I mean, they go 5 wides, 4 wides, up tempo, run to the ball and snap it, before you get set, everything like that. Matt McFadden was able to kind of know where at least he was supposed to go. I mean, he was trying to line everybody up, and that wasn't easy, but he was still able to kind of get slide past some people and make plays, get tackles for loss, kind of stop Western Kentucky's tempo by making plays in the backfield. And you didn't really see anybody else doing that. But he's been high level. When your middle linebacker is high level, that does help everything else go. I mean, the defensive line has been pretty good. Not dominant, but Ryder Anderson, the transfer from Ole Miss, has been really, really effective and has come in. He was not necessarily an all-the-time guy for Ole Miss. Made some plays, but wasn't necessarily anybody that looked like he wasn't an all-SEC defensive end or anything like that. But he's been really sturdy for them. Made some big plays, had some key sacks. So they've got kind of a premium guy on the defensive line. But McFadden has really been the guy who's made them go. They're still strong in the defensive backfield. I mean, they've got 3 all Big Ten guys that came back this year in Tywone Mullen, the All-American, Jalen Williams, who had a concussion against Western Kentucky, so we don't know about his status yet for Saturday, but also Devon Matthews, though Matthews also missed some time. He got we think it was a stinger against Iowa. He basically was down for a little while, got up, was walking on his own power, but seemed to be kind of shaking his hands a little bit. And he spent the weekend in the hospital. So that was, piecing things together, even though they won't flat out say it. That's what it seemed like. So he's gotten back the last couple of weeks to being able to play. So those guys are all legit. And they've Raheem Lane, I think, has played really well as a guy who was a converted cornerback, missed all last year with the knee injury. I think it was an ACL. And, that defensive backfield is pretty solid. They usually don't get crunched in the defensive backfield. They had some moments on Saturday. Western Kentucky just generally gets everybody. I think Bailey Zapp had thrown for 10 touchdowns in the first 2 weeks, threw for an obnoxious number of yards when he was at Houston Baptist before he made this transfer. And he's going to just put up, ungodly numbers in that league this year in Conference USA, as I believe where they still are. So, it's still a strong defensive backfield. Mullen made, I think, some really key plays at moments when they really need to have him to preserve that game. So Mullen and McFadden are the real thing. The rest have not been as dominant as they were a year ago. I think the loss of Jamar Johnson, who went to the NFL, was a 5th-round pick by the Broncos, I think was significant. Yeah. They haven't had somebody that's ball hawked quite like Johnson did last year. And so that's taken some getting used to. But generally, yes, the defense is still stronger than the offense. Even in the games they've lost, they've had some really good moments defensively.
How, I guess that would be my question. Then you probably just answered it. My follow-up of So we know Tywan Mullen is a talented football player. We know Mike McFadden's a talented football player. But Penn State has a couple of good receivers. Do you think that secondary is deep enough to match up with Penn State, or is it more about the scheme and the sum of the parts?
It's a tough question because if they don't have Williams, they're going to be digging into their depth a little bit, and they also had a depth guy go down, Chris Keys. I believe he's a redshirt freshman or a true sophomore. It hasn't been around very long, but it's a guy they really like. It wasn't super highly rated, but one of those dudes that from the time he got on, it's like this guy is going to be your next lockdown corner. He got a lot of work in the Idaho game because Williams was kind of on sketchy ground. I think I don't know if he had a leg or a knee or whatever it was, but he got some work in there, and he landed awkwardly, leaping for a ball and tore his ACL. So he was kind of the next man up. So they're digging a little bit deeper. Kind of the next guy they go to. They have three cornerbacks that are part of their sort of main rotation. When they go to nickel, usually Mullen moves inside to nickel, and it's Reese Taylor and Jalen Williams that stay on the outside. They kind of go big, and another guy I didn't mention is Marcelino McCrary-Ball, their Husky. They kind of go big and go small with that secondary, where it was usually two linebackers. It's a 4-2-5 formation, but they can either go nickel with kind of a smaller guy with really a third corner, or they can go. But their other sort of nickel option is, using the Husky, who's kind of a linebacker safety hybrid.
Right.
Marcelino Ball is a huge dude. If you've ever seen that guy,
I've been a fan of his for a while. I've liked him for a bit. He had an ACL last year, right? How has he come back from that?
He's been good so far. He seems healthy, claims to be healthy. Doesn't hasn't said that there's anything holding him back. You haven't seen huge plays for him yet, but he's had a couple. He's been there, and certainly he's just a tough dude who can cover. Has made some key plays, some key times. But yeah, he's getting back into it, getting back into the flow. Maybe not as dominant as he was before the injury, but still making some plays. But still just making that secondary more, just more versatile. Just having a big body like that can cover, but also step up in the run. Be part of that when he has to kind of bring the bulk that you don't have when you don't have a third linebacker.
Yeah, it sounds like injuries have been a real problem for Indiana so far this year, and a little bit last year. I always like watching those slot safety hybrids because you're always trying. I always say the 11th defender is the most important on the field because if you can find that guy that can play the slot and can also play the run, you found the key to your defense that you can feel. If you're a defensive coordinator, you can feel whole knowing that you've got a guy that is good at both. So Ball has always been a guy I've had my eye on. So that's interesting to see how quarterback and slot hybrid player come back from ACLs very differently. I find that kind of stuff super interesting. In this game,
I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Also, part of it is the timing. McCrary-Ball injured his knee before the season, and Penix injured it deep into the season. So McCrary-Ball had a lot more time to rehab. I don't think he got any work in the spring. If he did, it wasn't much, but obviously he had a lot more time. Basically just had that whole season. Whereas Penix was healthy up until I think it was November 30th was the Maryland game, which usually is the end of your season. Obviously, last year was a little bit different with schedules and everything like that. But I don't know. I think they played one game after that, and then the bowl game. So that's another part of it too. Is McCrary-Ball just had a lot less. But there's also again it is a different game, and McCrary-Ball, I think he had a no contact jersey on for most of camp. But it's different. You're still running around with everybody. You're still chasing everybody. You're still going to fall over people. Even if they're told not to hit you, not to block you, be nice to you, basically, in the secondary. That's not as sure of a thing as it is when you're behind the offensive line and everybody's like, no. Nobody come close to this guy. No one's blowing the whistle to make sure McCrary-Ball didn't get hit.
Right.
It was just, this is a very, very strong recommendation we're making right here. Whereas quarterback is an absolute requirement. If you hit this man, you are off this football team. Not quite, but it was made clear to the defensive line. If anybody touches him, you guys all run, every single one of you. Like not just the guy who hit him, but everybody else in the team. The whole defense is running if the quarterback gets hit. McCrary-Ball was sort of get used to the feel, and you didn't see the jitters or anything like that at that point. So
I guess we'll wrap up with a couple questions. Have you seen Penn State, and what have your thoughts been of them if you have?
A little, yeah, just for sake of, I'm an alum. I was texting with my old roommate when for most of the Auburn game, and I want to say, who else did I see them play? I feel like I didn't get to see much of the Wisconsin game, a little bit, but mostly the most extensive work I've seen from them, was the Auburn game. Obviously Jahan Dawson is just phenomenal. I mean, I can't, they've had some good wide receivers over the last, 15, 20 years, but the catches he's able to make are just incredible. So like, as you mentioned, that is going to be a tough assignment. It's a fun matchup. If you imagine, Mullen on him, that's two legit big time guys right there. Tight ends, name of the tight end is escaping me. That
Brenton Strange?
Yes, Brenton Strange was big time on Saturday night against Auburn. I think just they're used to them. The ability to find him. He was wide open, on a lot of those, but just the fact the offense, the scheme managed to get him in good positions to make some plays. That Sean Clifford managed to find him to make some plays, I think was impressive. And I think it's something I think you said early on. Clifford seems like a little bit of a different guy. I don't think you look at him and say that everything is fixed and that you're, looking at him as as an All-American type necessarily, but I think if you're a Penn State fan, you are much more confident in Clifford right now than you were a year ago. A lot of your sort of nervousness when he drops back and think, oh my God, he's going to get picked again. There's less of that. I don't know if it's removed, but I imagine generally there is more confidence if you're a Penn State fan seeing what Clifford does. It obviously makes a huge difference. Having Noah Cain, basically having somebody they can trust back there, running back as opposed to last year where you lose Journey Brown in the offseason with his heart condition, and then Cain goes down in the first game against Indiana. Obviously, they're a better team because they have a running back they can trust. Parker Washington is another guy that impresses me as a possession wide receiver, a guy that just finds a way to get open on those intermediate routes and keeps drives going. I mean, they've got a lot of weapons on offense. They're obviously doing a lot more. They're creative. Throwing the fullback back there is sort of in the wild. Do you even call it a wildcat when it's the fullback?
I had a conversation about this, and I don't know because he's a former high school quarterback. He plays tight end. Right. I called it the Tim Tebow package.
That's actually a really good point. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So that guy, I think that's one thing that stood out to me listening to Indiana's defensive coaches talking about dealing with them this week is it's the stuff that you never used to hear about a Penn State offense. It's like formations. They do this stuff, they do that stuff, they do tempo, and you're like, who is this team I'm talking about? Who are these guys? This is not my school. This doesn't sound like what I grew up watching, but they are nervous about it, and I think. Nervous maybe isn't the word, but I think they are really glad they played an up-tempo team this week in Western Kentucky. And I know Brandon Shelby, the cornerbacks coach, was like, it feels like, we touched our hand on the stove. We had to be reminded how tough this is because they got burned by Ole Miss in the Outback Bowl. With up-tempo. I mean, they were really struggling, especially in the heat at the end of the year. Having been used to kind of Indiana winter at that point, getting out there in Florida and having to deal with that tempo, they had a problem. And it was almost like they kind of forgot about it. Like guys, Shelby said, guys were running, against Western Kentucky. And they're like, Coach, we really got to do this. And he's like, yes, you do. You have no idea what's coming for you. And then they got, gassed. And it basically was like this week, he's like, see what I said? Run. Don't you are going to have to be ridiculously well conditioned to last in this game. And Penn State certainly is going to be able to play power football better, where Western Kentucky was not able to beat them that way. When Western Kentucky was trying to pick up, I think there was a really big 4th and short where when Western Kentucky was rolling and Indiana stoned them. And if they pick that up, it's a different ballgame. But Indiana was able to win up front there. They had like three jumbo dudes in the back, the backfield and whatever, and Indiana still flat out wins that because they're going to win up front when it's sort of straight up man to man, and you're trying to run the ball up their gut. They weren't great at doing that. They had some big chunk runs, but when it came down to it, when they knew they were going to run the ball, Indiana was generally able to stop them. But when it comes to like Penn State's going to pick those up and they're going to be able to fling it, and they're going to be able to run it up tempo. So it is a more difficult thing. So I don't expect it to be as wide open and wild as Western Kentucky is. But the fact that they have that in their game plan is something that Indiana is that they know they have to be ready for. They've gotten beat by it before, and they know they've got to do a lot better than they have in the past against the tempo.
Oh, one last question for you. What are the keys to this game, in your opinion? What are the things you're looking for? If X happens, then Indiana wins, or if X happens, then Penn State wins. What are you looking at?
I mean, that I think is key one. I mean, if Indiana to have a chance has to be able to slow down that tempo. That's kind of the biggest issue is they've got to be able to slow down that tempo. They can't just get run out of the building like that. They've got to be able to make stops. Keep Penn State from being in a situation where they can just get the ball set and run and roll. Like they've got to break up some passes, force some incompletions. Keep that from being the way they play, and keep them behind the chains. Don't give up a lot on the ground either. I mean, they just got to stop Penn State from getting rolling offensively, and basically Penix got to throw for a bunch. I mean, he's got to be able to carry them, and it's going to be hard for Indiana to figure out what it's doing without Matthews. That is not going to be an easy thing for them to do. Just kind of find, develop playmakers, and really they got to get contributions from everywhere. Basically every wide receiver has to do something for them to have a shot. I mean, Indiana's behind the eight ball. Just not going to lie about that piece of being in a situation where you've got to make up for losing a guy like that and do it against an offense that is, that's clicking pretty well. That was able to really move the ball against an SEC team last week. So, I mean, like Penix got to be phenomenal for Indiana to win, and the defense has to not give up, not let tempo get on top of them. If those two things don't happen, Penn State wins. Basically, if Penix doesn't go crazy on them, and they don't, Penn State can't turn the ball over, but that's obvious.
Yeah, I was going to say X, Y, and Z has to happen for Indiana to win, but that happened last year, so it can happen. Yeah.
So as long as X, Y, and Z don't happen, as long as the tragic stuff doesn't happen, Penn State should win. Basically, without if they don't turn the ball over. Now, again, if Clifford does, if Clifford throws the ball away, Clifford throws the ball in the hands of Indiana guys and sets them up with short fields, Indiana is going to take advantage. And they've got guys with good ball skills. They're capable of disguising coverages. They're capable of throwing stuff at him that can keep him off balance. I think Clifford's better at that than he was a year ago. But they burned him on that a few times. I'm just trying to think of. I'm remembering watching that game, and I was, I wasn't covering it. I was just watching it. But I remember just a couple of plays by Clifford. Like, what were you doing? Like, what did you see there? Yeah. And and so he can't be in that situation. It can't be a deal where like you're throwing the ball into double coverage or triple coverage or whatever, or just missing that someone is where it doesn't look like he's going to be. That I think it's just the key for Penn State is just don't make mistakes is sort of the biggest thing is just don't put Indiana in advantage situations. Obviously Indiana can turn it around. Again, Indiana's in a situation where, again, they just got burned by tempo last week. You're going to throw that at them again. And they're in a situation where they've got to find a new playmaker, and their quarterback is still getting back to being himself. You have the advantage in that case. So it's just if Penn State doesn't throw it away, they should win. But they can't throw it away.
Dustin Dopirak of the Indy Star and the Bloomington Herald Times. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, Tom. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back tomorrow on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Ryan Snyder's best bets coming up, as well as some recruiting news. There is some more stuff on the horizon, so stay tuned. We'll be back tomorrow on the BWI Daily Edition.